Welcome back. Ryan Binkley is not a name you may have heard of in the Republican presidential race yet, but he's crossed the 50,000 donor threshold for the second debate and is working on boosting his poll numbers to ensure the RNC includes him on the stage in about 3 weeks. A pastor and business leader, Mr. Binkley is our guest this morning on Close Up. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Adam. Great to be with you this morning.
So to start out, just tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running for president.
Well, thank you. Well, I am a middle market merger and acquisition CEO. My company helps business owners sell their business. We also have a strategic growth company, a software engineering company, wealth management. About 400 employees across the nation. I'm also a pastor. My wife and I, Ellie, we've been married for 24 years. We started a church about 10 years ago. So I'm carrying this message in my heart that our country's in trouble. My main background's economics, so I see our country through this financial lens of how are we doing? And we're not doing well. We're, in fact, I think, setting the next generation up for economic failure because of so much debt we have and no plan out. And so I'm coming with a plan to fix that, as well as end the cultural divide that we're in our country. Have some significant things I think that we need to do to end the division that we're in, and that's why I'm running.
What sets you apart? If you get on that debate stage on September 27th, what is going to make Ryan Binkley stand out to voters?
Well, several things. I mean, first of all, I'm a business person. So when I look at our country, you know, economically, we have candidates up there. Most of them are politicians, and not to discredit that, that's important. But most of them don't understand or really have a goal to have a balanced budget. So it's been since Ronald Reagan, since we've had a president that crossed the aisle, that transcended the party, that grew the party, but also called for a stewardship financially. So we went $7.5 trillion in debt under President Trump. I actually have a plan, a 7-year economic plan, rescue plan, I would call it, to balance the budget for the first time in 30 years that we've done this. We haven't made a principal payment on debt. So that's one big thing. The other thing is how we would do business with healthcare. You know, I'm the only one that really has a plan to desocialize or demonopolize the big institutions in insurance, pharma, and the providers to bring healthcare costs down. There's a lot of solutions there. And I'm really looking to have bipartisan approach for the border, but urban America. The big thing that's different than me, Republicans are running with the same platform they have for 40 years. The electorate has changed, and I want to have a Republican approach to urban America for kids in education, job training for high school kids in urban America, do some things different.
A lot to get to there, but on the issue of federal spending, you mentioned it's a thing that you Republicans have campaigned on cutting spending for a long time, and the last couple Republican administrations have not done that. In fact, it's gone in the opposite direction. One, why is that? Two, what are you going to cut if you get to be president?
Wow. So, you know, you're right. So Republicans have spent just as much money as Democrats have, just on different things. We went $7.5 trillion in debt with President Trump, on that same track now with Biden. So understanding and communicating to America what this means. So this is what causes inflation. This large monetary supply, we have to borrow money from ourselves or roll the printing presses to pay for it. And that's what's caused inflation. And now the Fed is raising rates. So everybody's home prices now, mortgage, rents, car, fuel, anything related to food, shelter, or clothing is now 30% higher. So what would I do? I would actually get involved in cutting the earmarks. And so part of our big spending package is wasteful spending that we have to do, get rid of. I actually believe that we have some social programs that we have to desocialize with Medicare and Medicaid. When we restructure health care, we can save Medicare and Medicaid. Actually, Social Security is set to expire. I'm 55 years old. In 10 years, I'm only going to get 78 cents on the dollar. We have a plan to actually help rescue that. Instead of pegging Social Security to inflation, pegging it to GDP growth, this will help balance the resources in there so we can be wise, freeze some things, cut some things, so we can make some strategic growth areas as well.
You talked about the connection with urban America. In your ministry, I'm sure you've done work out there on the streets with homeless people. This has usually been a local issue, something that's dealt with municipalities, counties, whatever. But it seems like it's a serious problem across this country, everywhere you go. Is there something the next president can do? And if so, what would you do?
Well, right now, first of all, I would lead. You know, I've got to be able to tell America that there's some things I'll do legislatively, some things are leadership driven. This is a leadership driven area. Every state's responsible for it, but really every person, company, church, charity in your city is responsible. It's up to us to own our cities, up to us to do more. Some of it's long-term approach and short-term. Short-term is what do we do right now to help the people in the streets? That's mental health care, spiritual health care, helping them have situations to get off drugs and being able to provide for their needs today. That's not the federal government's job to do that. That's the job of us owning our cities and states to do that. But long-term term, it's education. It's helping kids have a vision for their life. It's getting them on living wage jobs early, right out of high school, if they're not going to go to college, so they can have a career. So many people fall into this cycle of poverty and then also oftentimes drugs because of a lack of vision, and they don't have a living wage job to lean on. So we want to get back to teaching trades again. You know, when I was in school 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you'd have trades and you'd learn to be a plumber, electrician. We need to get back to that. We have actually a need for these great jobs in America, and we can do that. We can change America's culture.
So if you want help on the local level, usually right now the system works, Medicaid dollars come in, and if you're going to be cutting there or changing that program, how do you find help or plug in help with these people if that money is not there?
Well, you know, so a lot of it, again, is volunteerism. So when I'm talking about urban America, the federal government, we have to understand, is out of money completely. We're $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion in debt every year. But what does this mean? This means us starting community centers, actually getting back doing trade jobs, training people again, and some of the areas that they need help in, people are willing to give. Corporations are willing to give. We have to just start owning it. And this is our job. You know, I'm a Christian. I believe the message of love, loving your neighbor, is something that we all can embrace regardless of your faith or religion. We can also see people that are struggling, they're poor, help them have a different place in life today. And that's what we need to do.
You're obviously going to face a bit of a learning curve on foreign policy. So first of all, how do you make up on that ground? And second, would a Binkley administration be a beacon of American freedom in the world, or are you more of a realist and you're going to go America first and say only if it's in our interests are we going to get involved anywhere?
Wow. So there's a fine balance in there. Right now, most of the Republicans, there's half and half. Some of them want to like run out of Ukraine. Some of them want to be in there forever, whatever it takes. I'm actually neither one of those. So first of all, I do believe this. When we are strong financially here, which is my strength, economic policy, we cannot be $50 trillion in debt and think we're going to lead internationally. China is working relationships with Brazil, Russia, India, Eastern Europe, Africa, and South America. They're loaning money. We're borrowing money. So they're developing relationships out of us because we're so weak economically. When we get strong here, we get a balanced budget, we have inflation under control, our dollar sound, then we'll lead internationally again. China will listen to us. Putin will listen to us. Xi Jinping will listen to us because we're strong. And I would defend freedom. I mean, I'm so glad that our leaders of the past defended freedom, but not forever. We don't have this ability to be in war forever. So what I would do in Ukraine right now, I would first of all get solid here financially. I would call NATO to start paying the bill more so, and then I would begin to lead a discussion with Putin and other NATO leaders to end this war with diplomacy and strength. We're not going to be in it forever, but I would never allow Putin to just run through Eastern Europe as well. Same respect with China. You know, Taiwan is a partner. They are a democratic country. In fact, the wealth in there is about 3 times that as China. China needs to learn from Taiwan instead of the other way around. So I would really lead this a different way, but that's the way I would lead it, with strength and diplomacy.
Back on the domestic side of things, you're opposed to abortion. If, say, for instance, Senator Lindsey Graham's 15-week ban landed on your desk as president, would you sign it? You know, difficult question there. So, first of all, I am pro-life, but I recognize this. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, that didn't change anybody else's heart. So right now, this is in the states issue. That is a hypothetical question because it's not likely to happen anytime soon. But the reality is this: I am pro-life, but I would rather be involved in a discussion of what does that mean. I think we should help young women in a moment of crisis more than we do today. I think we should have adoption services that are more readily available. Change the conversation. Foster kids today. Many of them are growing out of that system without having the chance of adoption. I want to lead a movement to where creating a culture of life where everyone should be in a home if they want to be in one. And I think then we can educate more and actually help women in a crisis mode. We can do a lot more. And then when that time is right for these amendments to come or these laws to come for that, I think that America will be ready for it. And when that's time, that discussion will be had then. Well, but let's say you do achieve all of this cultural change. Would you sign a bill like that? I would sign something early on like that, yes. Do you view Trump, former President Donald Trump, as a man of good moral character? You know, that's a good question. So he's done a lot of good things. And so I'm not going to discredit him on all the good things he did. I was at his inauguration. I supported him in 16 to 20. At the same time, you know, he's done a lot of questionable things as far as how he's led our country in times of crisis. So
In many ways, I think he's led well. In many ways, not so well. So that's a personal question depending on the topic. I would just say this. I would lead our country to a better place, I believe, in connecting to each other. Leading with integrity, not just in financially and not just in leadership-wise internationally, but how do we connect to one another, whether it's a Democrat or Republican or an independent. And I would lead us to be a place of unity, because the disunity we have right now is really what's tearing us apart. You know, Abraham Lincoln said it this way: if America is ever destroyed, it's not going to be because of outside. It's going to be because of the inside. We destroyed ourselves. And as president, I would recognize that and make sure that didn't happen.
And certainly that problem might get a little worse as we see President Trump on trial, former President Trump on trial over the next year. Some of these are federal trials, and he certainly could be convicted in the next year. If you're president in 2025, would you pardon him on those federal charges?
You know, it depends on which ones it was. Likely, from what I've seen right now, likely so. The bad part is the Durham report. When that Durham report came down, they said, admitted, hey, we were biased here, we didn't handle this right. And then a slew of these indictments come. So it appears most of them are political. Unless there was something greater than what I've seen, likely so.
We're seeing a lot of videos these days of President Biden, of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell having issues related to age. They're both pretty up there. What does that say about America right now? Does that need to change? Do we need a new generation in there? Is it time for people like this to step aside?
Well, absolutely, it's time. I mean, these are great leaders, and they've done great things for many generations, but every once in a while, it's time to sit there and really look at, is it time to pass the baton down? And that's what it's time to do for many of these leaders. I believe in term limits, but the people that are enjoying the benefits of no term limits would have to change the laws. And so what would happen for that? Statesmen and women would have to rise up that really went there to not be lifelong politicians, but to really serve their country for a period of time. It would take that again. And I think people should start thinking about next level leadership at all times.
All right, Mr. Binkley, we'll see you out there on the campaign trail. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Good to be with you.
Appreciate it.